So yeah, so I think we'll get started. So I'll invite all of the panelists to come in onto the screen with me now. And that's great. So we have everybody in. So first of all, to everybody who has joined us on this Making an Impact session this evening, can I extend a very, very warm welcome to you all to say thank you very much for coming along. This is a chance for people who might be interested in what the volunteers in Dublin Rape Crisis Centre do or interested in volunteering themselves to hear a little bit more about volunteering from volunteers. We speak often about having the authentic voice coming through in our sessions, and we are joined by 4 of our volunteers here this evening who will give us an authentic voice of their experience and just a little bit about what it means to them. And for every volunteer, I think it's going to be different. It's going to be your own way, but hopefully you'll get a sense of it from this. It's a webinar, so we won't have chat between everybody. However, there is a facility on your screen to ask any questions that you might want to, or to make any comments. And we hopefully will be able to pick up on some of those as we go along. We're hoping that we will be here maybe, that we'll be here maybe 30, 40 minutes, that kind of time. So we won't keep you any longer than we need to in order to get some of the valuable information through to you. So on your screen here now with me, you will see 4, I should say who I am first. I'm Noeline Blackwell, and I'm not one of the volunteers. I'm the Chief Executive in Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. And I want to, first of all, to thank our 4 great volunteers for coming along here this evening. We depend so heavily on our volunteers as part of the group of people who provide our services and who make sure that there is a reliable source of information and support and a listening ear available to people as they need it at a time where they might need it very badly indeed. So in order of how people are going to speak to us. The first volunteer we will ask to speak is Trish, and Trish Eady has joined during COVID. She's one of our COVID baby volunteers, and indeed, I think Trish, just last night you met one of your fellow volunteers for the first time in person. So she did her training completely online. And although there were a few obstacles on the way, such as that business of not meeting your fellow volunteers in person, we're very grateful that Trish stayed with us and has shown such commitment and hard work and support for us. And literally just last night, we had a small recognition for the fact that she and some others have just completed 2 years of volunteering with us. After that, we have Cian, and Cian was a volunteer, no longer is a volunteer. I'll explain that in my couple of sentences down along the way. So Cian volunteered right through COVID as well, and has since then. And as he was doing that, he was also studying. So he's studying psychotherapy in college. Now he has become a staff member on the telephone team, and he was one of the first cohort of staff that we had on at night. Before that, we depended entirely on volunteers at night, but this seems to be an arrangement that allows for more flexibility. And then we have Maire, and Maire is a volunteer. Says she's a country girl, even though Dublin is claiming her because she's been living here and working here for a number of years. Been with the DRCC for almost 2 years, Maire, I think, and you do SATU and phones, and you find the work to be rewarding, even though it can be very challenging indeed. And then finally, we have Mark. Mark started as a volunteer with us Mark Wynne started in 2018. And at a time where we were conscious that at the time all our volunteers were female, and he was one of the first male volunteers, so that now people who phone the phone line get a message saying you may be met by a male or female member of staff. And we found that actually it worked out very well. So thanks, Mark, for being one of the good pilots for us in that. And then Mark stayed on after graduating for the 2 years, stayed on through COVID, which was so important at a time where training was really difficult. And now he has been taking part in the training of our new volunteers. And so he shares his experience, always offering encouragement. And currently he is interning with us on our therapy team. So delighted to have Mark joining us on the staff in that way as well. So delighted to have you all on board. And we're going to start with just asking each of you to just give a couple of minutes, giving us a sense of what you experienced on volunteering, just a little bit about it. Trish, if you would be good enough to lead off. Thank you.
Thank you, Noeline, and thank you for the introduction. So as Noeline said, I trained during COVID. About 6 months before I started training, I'm from a medical background. I had semi-retired, and so I had a bit more time on my hands. And I'd always thought that when I had a bit more time on my hands, that I would do some voluntary work. I've always been an advocate for gender equality, both in society and in the workplace, and have been a mentor for younger doctors, male and female, along the way. So I did feel that I had something to offer. There is a history of sexual abuse in my family, a close family member, and that, I suppose, steered me in the direction of the Rape Crisis Centre. I did look at other organisations, but the governance of DRCC seemed to be very solid. It was a reputable organisation, and it appeared to offer good training. So that swayed me to apply for DRCC, and I haven't regretted it. The training was, as Noeline said, online during COVID. It was the first time it had been done like that. And it wasn't easy. I won't say it was easy, but the training is there to challenge you, because there is challenging situations that you will meet. But we got used to the online situation. Some of us were more technically adept than others, and we had some funny moments during it as well. So I'm really happy that I volunteered. I've just finished my 2 years, but I'm going to continue on helping with SATU, the Sexual Assault Treatment Unit, where we go in to support people who have been subjected to sexual violence, and I hope to continue that into the future. And I felt I could contribute to people who had sexual violence, and I hope over the last 2 years that I have. So thank you for asking me to be part of this webinar tonight.
And you surely have indeed, Trish. Thanks a million for that. And thank you for giving us kind of a sense of where you came from on that. Cian, I might turn to you and ask you a little bit about your experience of becoming a volunteer and what you found about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Psychology is my background, and I found myself just before COVID as well in 2020, I guess, with a bit of spare time on my hands, and I heard about the volunteering opportunity on the radio. And kind of importantly, they specified that they were looking for men too, which I was delighted about, because I had been interested in the issues around sexual violence and the population that suffer those consequences, and would really, wanted to just help out. So applied for the volunteering position and got it, and was delighted. And volunteering was great. Somewhat similar to Trish, I actually did I did half of my volunteer training in person, which was fab, and then COVID happened March 2020, and everything was told we're going online. So it was a little bit of learning on the spot, but the volunteering was the training was just great anyway. It kept going, and You know, soon after that, we started actually on the line volunteering, which was just phenomenal. You know, we've lots of things that I would love to talk about, which we'll get into, but yeah, ultimately I was volunteering on the line for almost 2 years, I think a year and a half, and then a position came up on the team that I, you know, would have loved to have gotten, so I applied for that and did, and ended up being a staff member, and haven't looked back since. I've been delighted to be here. So volunteering was, you know, not only fantastic in and of itself, but was great just in terms of all the avenues that it opened up, among many things. So yeah, I think that's pretty much me. I had some volunteering experience before in the past. I had most kind of similarly, I had volunteered with Childline. So I had volunteered on a helpline before, which kind of gave me the confidence to know that I could do it and to not be too intimidated by it. But the training helped with all of that anyway, and we'll get into that. Yeah. So.
Super stuff. That's great. And of course, one of the things that came out of COVID, which has, like many things, there were some blessings in it as well, is that some of that online material that we used when you were training in those times, you and Trish, we've been able to keep, so that people can do a bit of their training online now. But we're back to what we much prefer, which is an effective training program, person to person along the way. Thank you very much. Maire Hoolan, we'll come to you now, and just to see, would you just give us a little bit of a flavour about how you came to volunteering? And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Noeline, for inviting me this evening. So for me, my background is that I worked a lot in customer service over the years in my job at Revenue and my current job in the Residential Tenancies Board. And I like to be as useful and helpful as possible with people. And I guess that's the type of person that I am. I'm understanding, and I get that things are very hard for people, and I come across that time and time again through my work with just dealing with people in their everyday lives. And I suppose I came across the Rape Crisis Centre in college then in Waterford. I remember on a night out, closed the toilet cubicle door, and there was a sign for the Rape Crisis Centre, and I don't know, it always stuck with me that, oh, that's kind of something that I'd like to do. Maybe not now, I was only 23 and as green as anything. So yeah, so I put a little pin on it, and then I went about my studies. I did a little bit of psychology, counselling studies. When I was in college, I was trained to do some peer support in second year for first year students, but I never got to do any practice with it. It was just skills that I developed that really helped me as well. My active listening skills really developed throughout my studies and just through my work. And then I don't know, I got an email one day from the DRCC. I must have signed up for a newsletter at some point, and it was the right time. And I went, I've got time now. I'm not studying. I'm settled in my job. I know what I'm doing. And yeah, now is the time to kind of do it. And that's what kind of drew me to the RCC, was the commitment. It was 4 times a month for 2 years. And I was like, that's doable. I can do it. And like Trish, I'm actually planning on continuing on past it as well, to kind of continue on my service with you. The training was amazing. I think that really set it. I did it online, hybrid, a little bit online. I got to meet my crew though, which was amazing. A few of us have kept in touch. Unfortunately, with everybody's lives, it's not always easy. We started with maybe 12. Yeah, kind of whittled down over the 2 years, but yeah, the connection is still there with a few core of us, which is lovely, and we still keep in contact with the others that can't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really lovely community, family feel. Yeah, that's my.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. We'll come back to some of those things again more after this. But I'll just run over to you now, Mark Wynne. You're kind of the veteran of the volunteers here. One of the first of this group. So can you talk a little bit about what drew you to it and why you took it up? And yeah, thank you.
Well, being a veteran can have both benefits and drawbacks. But look, I think it's important to say that being a volunteer with the Rape Crisis Centre has nothing but been a privilege for me, and it's been an honour to, you know, to volunteer. And it's a wonderful organisation to be part of, and as a volunteer, you feel part of the organisation, and the supports from the centre are incredible. I think though it's important just to reiterate the training. The training is it's incredibly, as Trish said, it's incredibly difficult, but so rewarding. Like it's important for me to say, like, prior to doing the training and prior to volunteering with the Rape Crisis Centre, I thought I understood, or at least had some kind of understanding of the trauma of rape on the victim. And it's only through the training and volunteering on the helpline that I got a true understanding of the effects. And for me, it's a privilege to bear witness to the pain of others, and to walk on them on the short journey that you do be with them on the line. It's an absolute honour. And from a personal perspective, I feel I've gained much more than I've given to the Rape Crisis Centre. I've received much more in return. And being part now of the intern team and start my placements, you know, it has been a wonderful journey, and I would recommend it to anyone to get involved, because it's honourable and it's really good work, and I would recommend it.
That's brilliant. Just for anyone who might be listening, you don't have to end up as a staff member in Dublin Rape Crisis Centre just because you start out on the line in the training. But I wonder, could I ask you, before I go back to the training, Maire, can I go back to you about that business of the commitment, you know, that set period of time? Someone listening might say that's quite off-putting, that I have to do this amount of training, I have to do this amount of shifts for this length of time. But you actually found that it made it all doable in some ways.
Definitely. Like, I knew what was expected of me, and I like that. And I'm a commitment orientated person. If I was let to be wishy-washy, I'll be wishy-washy, and I like that. I knew what was expected of me, and that's just the type of person that I am, and it's worked out really well for me. And good. And it is as well nice to hear that at the end of that time, both you and Trish can say, we'll stay on a bit longer, we'll do something else a little, you know, a little bit differently maybe, or whatever. So Trish, what was it in the training that, like, what were you trained to do? I mean, we're talking to people who might be interested in doing this themselves. What did the training give you that allowed you to take that kind of big step of taking your first phone call?
I think first and foremost, it trained me to listen. If you have a good pal or a family member who rings you up looking for advice, and we all have that, you're inclined to be directive and tell them what you think they should do. And I think in the training that was beaten out of us, basically. Not literally, and I was online, so they couldn't beat me. But you know, you're taught to listen and to allow them to express their feelings, and to very much stick with their feelings. And on the phone line, you deal with people who have been raped recently, raped today, but also people who have historical sexual abuse or sexual violence that are still dealing with issues around that. And it's to try and allow them to find a way through this and out the other side. And you're not going to do that in one phone call, but you're there with them for that, as Mark said, that part of their journey. And really, I think it taught me how to just sit and listen to them.
And then, so that was what you were doing for whoever was on the other end of the phone. How did you learn? Were you given skills to mind yourself?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
what did that look like? Yeah. A bit.
So, yeah, because a lot of this can be upsetting, traumatic to you as the listener. I suppose I'm fairly battle hardened, but not everybody is. And I have the facility to compartmentalize things that can upset me, but you do need to visit them again and deal with them. So it did taught me skills to, how to relax, how to do breathing techniques if you're upset, to take a break, to that if something's really upsetting, you can take a break. And also there was always in the background, there was one of the staff members from DRCC on the emergency phone line, that if you had a particular issue, if you were very upset, you could ring them and they would take over, or you could just to give you a break from it as well. There was always support.
Yeah, so a bit of a support for you there. Just a reminder to people who are on the line, if you've questions or if you've comments, the Q&A is there. Feel free to put something into it. You don't have to, but it's just that is there in the absence of us, all of us sitting around in a room. Cian, can I ask you, how did you feel at the end of your training when you had to take your first call?
Yeah, that was an interesting time. I felt like I felt entirely different to how I went into the training, because obviously it's such an intimidating thing to think about, to think that, okay, somebody who might be desperately in need of support, or just very hopeless and alone is going to be calling, and I'm going to be answering. But ultimately, after the training, I think what the training did for me was it allowed me to understand what is expected of me. And that's what I mean by that was that there's very few times, Trish said that the biggest thing was that it taught her to listen. And really, there's very few times that we're here to provide answers to people. There's only a handful of situations where we're giving people information, how to get to their nearest sexual assault treatment unit, stuff like that. But most people just want to be heard, and most people just want an honest, authentic voice on the other end of the phone. And so the training allowed me to relax and to just feel confident that who I was enough for that person in that moment of need that they had. So I remember thinking, just as I was taking my first call, that ultimately this person, number one, doesn't know that it's my first call, so I can relax a little bit there. They might think I'm on the line for years. That's all right, but ultimately that I wasn't there to do anything special. I wasn't there to put on a performance or to be amazing in any way at all. It was very simply just to say hello and how are you, and to go from there. And it's not it doesn't happen that often that you kind of get yourself wrapped up in a hole that you didn't foresee happening. Most of the calls are much more relatable than that, or just in terms of the emotions that people are expressing. And people, that's exactly it. People express their emotions. You don't really have to draw too much out of people. They're calling because they want to talk, because they're ready to talk. So I felt like after the training, I understood that a little bit more. And then it just took me to have a few calls, to have a few shifts, to realize that I was perfectly prepared to do this. There was nothing missing at that point. I still learned from experience, but ultimately, I think for me, it was the expectation of, this is fine. I can do this, and nobody's asking me to do anything wildly impressive or skillful. I'm just here to pick up the phone.
Would the others of you, would you relate to that, or did you have a different sense of it when you started volunteering?
Well, if I may,
Mark, and that,
I suppose being one of the first male volunteers, there was maybe a bit of a more of a light being shone on us, but I think that the fundamentals of it is, when you lift up the phone, it's just to be yourself, and just to say, and sometimes all you need to do is say, yes, I do believe you, and sometimes that's all it needs. And you know, to be able to demonstrate empathy and just to be yourself and sit with the client and allow the caller then just to speak to one wherever they need to speak to.
Right.
I
And so in some ways, what you learn in your training is that to be yourself a little bit better. It's not to be a different human being in some way. Yeah.
Absolutely, because you're not a different human being just because you lift up the phone. You can't be. You must be. You must be genuine and absolutely
be yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Maire, what would you say to that?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, you don't have to be superhuman. You don't have to have any answers. I discovered that all you need to do. I find that the amount of times that that the words, "I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm really sorry that happened to you," and people go, "Thank you," and you can feel the relief in their voice just from something so small. And like that, you're only dealing with people's emotions. You don't hear a lot of details. I think that might scare people off. With volunteering, I'm going to hear these awful stories. I don't think that I've heard a full story. You might hear snippets, but it's all emotion, how I'm feeling now. This is awful. This has happened to me. They always hate that person. I can't believe that's happened to me. Loneliness is a real impact for people, so you hear that, and a little bit of empathy of, yeah, their life is lonely, it is really tough out there. It's, you know, don't blame yourself, or don't be hard on yourself. Just being empathetic, a compassionate person is all you need to be. I don't think I've ever given any information on the phone, to be honest, anything, you know, other than that. I don't think anybody's ever needed a phone number or anything like that. I've always grabbed my pack, have it ready to go, but like I've never had to flick through it.
Well, it's better to have it and not to have to use it than not to have it. So
like, I'm not going to drag it out. The first call, I think, was like that, but like, it's so often, the majority of the time, it's just people just looking for 10 or 15 minutes of a chat, and most of the time it's them doing all the talking. And listening. So
and coming back to you, Trish, like, out of the volunteering, were there any big surprises out of you know, did you like big it sounds to me like part of it is you learn a little bit more about yourself, but were there any big surprises for you in the volunteering?
I suppose the training is, a lot of it is about dealing with, well, some of it, a fair bit about it is dealing with the acute situation of somebody who's had recent sexual violence. And I suppose I was a bit surprised that a lot of the phone calls you're dealing with it's past sexual violence, and as to how much this still affects people. For many reasons. And I think I wasn't quite prepared for that, but you learn to deal with it and to be empathetic to the people on the other end of the phone, because it doesn't matter when the sexual violence happened, it still affects them hugely.
It's a harm that's done to them, so it's how to cope with it. You've all spoken a little bit as well about the little communities of people that you developed, and it sounds like you developed friendships and little sort of groups of people whom you know quite well out of it now. I wonder, could I ask you, Cian, to speak a little bit to that, to the community within the volunteering group that, you know, did that helped you, or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, nobody goes into this expecting it to be, you know, rainbows. It's difficult content matter, and so everybody is very humble and everybody is very willing to. In part of the training, you have to really release all of your inhibitions, because the role plays, and I don't know if anybody in the participants have done role plays, but you really just kind of have to let go of your ego and do it. And in doing that, I think you make a lot of friends, and we're all very real with each other in terms of, you know, everybody thinks they could have done better most of the time in training, and you're hearing that from people and just kind of developing friendships with people. So I know I did. You know, I liked all of my group, but there was a few of us that we were particularly close with, and we ended up going out for dinner and stuff like that with, you know, frequently, and just still in contact with. But so there was lots of opportunity to make friends, basically, and also to just kind of to learn and grow as a person within other people, because we were all learning and growing at the same time. But I think it was important to mention that wasn't isolated to just the volunteers. I ended up getting to know lots of staff members before I became a staff member, and they were just so friendly, and so they essentially brought the same thing to the environment. Nobody ever came into the room to train us with an air of kind of superiority or, you know, anything like that. It was very much, look, we're all just human beings here, and we're all here literally because we want to help people. So it was a really nice atmosphere from which to kind of just say hi to people, and to really allow yourself to be seen, and to you know, to tell other people this is who I am, and to get a nice response from them. So that was my experience of it. Yeah.
That's great. I'm going to ask you all what advice you would give to a volunteer right now. So I might go in the order you spoke first. So Trish, if you were giving advice to somebody about them looking to volunteer with Dublin Rape Crisis Centre, to work as a volunteer on the helpline, or go to the sexual assault treatment unit, etc., what advice would you give to people? To someone?
Don't be afraid. You will be trained hugely, and that when you are on your first shift on the phone line, it is daunting, the first shift, there is no doubt about it. But actually, once the phone rings and you pick it up, you realize, oh, I know what to do, because of the immense training. And even on your first shift, you have a buddy. There's a buddy provided for the first couple of shifts. So I would say, don't be afraid. If you think about it, go for it.
Great, lovely, or at least inquire about it, you know. So that's where we'll be putting up a slide at the end here, showing people how to get more information about it. The website is drcc.ie. The tab is Get Involved, and within that there's Becoming a Volunteer, and there's a good bit of information there about it. Cian, I think I asked you next. So in terms of advice to an incoming volunteer, what would you say?
Yeah, I'm similar to Trish. I would say don't doubt yourself, because it's very easy to think, oh, I couldn't do that. And maybe you couldn't do it right now, but after the training, you'll realize that you're more than capable of doing it.
Yeah.
You know, so I would think, don't doubt yourself. Don't say that you yourself can't do this before you've even given it a shot. Because everybody, I think, there was nobody that I saw in my volunteering course that was actually ready for it. You know, we were all kind of going, how did I end up here?
What foolishness. Yes.
Yeah. So don't doubt yourself.
Maura, what would you say? And it's always tough to be kind of coming towards the end of a group on the same question.
I reiterate what Cian and Trish have said, but I'm also a go and do it kind of person. But if you're in two minds about it, just give it a go. I won't say that you might surprise yourself. I'd say you will surprise yourself.
Right.
The training is amazing. And there is support there, not just at the very beginning of your training, so, you know, when you start taking calls. Throughout, there's 24-hour care there, that if you take a hard call, either a phone call or a SATU call out that's tough, or that you just sits with you, or a few days later, you can email, text, or you can even ring the backup straight away, and there's somebody there. The staff are absolutely amazing. Cian and Maire are just the most wonderful supports. So you're never on your own, and like you have you just have all the support network there that's needed for you. You're never on your own.
Fantastic. And Mark,
well,
what would you say by way of advice?
Well, we're probably not good at giving advice, Noeline, but all I would say is that to be part of the Dublin Rape Crisis, it's so rewarding. Just and I said it already, it's an absolute privilege, you know, to lift that phone and bear witness to the pain of others, and you will get far more from it than what you'll ever give. And without giving advice, and I just ask those who are listening to just inquire, as Noeline, as you've said, Noeline, inquire, and you will be very surprised how rewarding this is. It's really good work, and you will enjoy it. When you'll find it rewarding, that's more important.
Yeah,
it is rewarding.
Terrific. That's great. There's an interesting question in here from somebody who says, would a victim of sexual violence be allowed to work in this form of volunteering? And then a very nice thank you for all your incredible work and the information. So I think the answer I would give to that will be, if you don't mind me just dealing with it this way, is saying, look, everybody comes with their own baggage and their own situation to something. And it may be that if somebody has had a recent experience of something, it just might not be the perfect time for you to do something. If it's a more distant experience, it may be something that you have been able to work around. So what I would say, I wouldn't let that put me off. I mean, if 1 in 4 or perhaps even 1 in 3 of the population has been a victim of sexual violence at some stage, we'd have a very small pool of people to work from if you had to exclude everyone who was a victim. But it is going to depend on your circumstances, and we would ask that you'd test it out. You don't have to get too specific, but our staff on just in the office are terrific and will deal with that in a very sensitive way. So please just do go and ask. I see another, Catherine here is coming in. Trish, you mentioned the number of people discussing older experiences, past experiences, and someone else mentioned loneliness. And then the question is, have we future plans to branch out extensively and let past survivors volunteer to help ease the isolation through group situations? So look, I mean, that kind of is in the same territory. We first of all try to ensure anyone working as a volunteer is safe and well-minded along the way. This means we have a discussion with people at the start of their volunteering, through the training course, if somebody, for instance, found it wasn't for them. But there will certainly be circumstances in which those who've survived sexual violence will also be answering and dealing with the situation. And in terms of the therapy end of it, and I may be misunderstanding you, Catherine, that's something where so therapy is something we do either one-to-one or in group sessions, and there may well be a volunteer role there in the future. And we just have to try and see what works best. The helpline is the core national service that we deliver. It is there 24/7 all along the way. In recent times, we've added the language line onto it so that even if English isn't a person's first language, we can supply simultaneous interpretation so that a person can speak in a language with which they're familiar, and we can answer them in a language they're familiar with. We also have the web chat, which is now developing its own space day or night. There was also, so those are, we're continuing to work on these, on the best way to support survivors. I also saw a note there from SATU saying that I can't see it anymore. Oh, well, now it's answered, I think. But yeah, from Dan, thank you very much indeed in the SATU, saying it's great to hear from the volunteers, how they got involved and how they find it. Certainly, Dr. Dan says from his perspective, the volunteers are an essential part of the work in the sexual assault treatment unit, from the initial support they offer to the survivor, to the survivor when they first enter, and the care they offer after when they've attended. It's very comforting. And thank you. You've always admired the volunteers who give their time day or night to do the work they do, and they're invaluable to help people who go in on their journey. And he says, thank you for sharing your experiences. Can I just say, Dr. Dan, people are equally complimentary about the sexual assault treatment unit and the great support that people get when they go in there. So thank you very much for that. I'm inclined to feel that it's late in the evening and you've stayed on longer maybe than you meant to. But can I see, do each of you want to say a final word before I wrap up? You don't have to. I might start, Mark, with you. Unmute yourself there and we'll hear you better.
Just to say, my time, the time I've spent with the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre has been a privilege, and I look forward to it being a continuing privilege. It has been a wonderful journey, really wonderful.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. And Maura.
Yeah, I see a question in there actually from somebody asking what's the best part about being a volunteer.
I just see it this second. Answer that for them.
Do you know what, being part of the community, the family, I know I've met Mark a few times. I know Cian, I think, from the phone line, just from chats when we've been on together. Trish, I know from get-togethers again, and also the monthly what's the
supervision or the
supervision as well. So you get to meet other volunteers on a regular basis, and we often go for an ale pint afterwards and stuff.
Yes.
So you know, it's nice. The community feel is fantastic, and it's really being part of the family is what sticks out with me.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Cian, for you, is there a last
thought? Yeah, I think, I mean, I get a huge amount from being, on the line, from being part of this organization. And I think what it is for me is that it can be very easy to be so despondent and hopeless when we're seeing all of the news and seeing everything that's happening in the courts and just hearing about it on the Late Late Show. And for me, I actually feel like I don't have to concern myself too much with the article I'm reading in the newspaper, because I feel like I'm doing something about it.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like I'm actually contributing to helping people. So for me, I think, I always feel really great when I kind of can say to myself, even if I feel like I didn't do a great job on the phone or whatever, that at least I answered the phone when maybe nobody else was there for that person to have their phone answered, So for me, I'm able to kind of walk around and know that at least I'm trying to do something, and I don't have to be so hopeless about the national issues, because there's people trying to make a difference, and you can be one of those people, and I feel like I am one of those people. So I get a lot out of that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Trish, you'll get the last word. Well, I'll get the last word, but you'll get the last volunteer word. Yes.
I suppose the best part of it for me is that you feel that in some ways you have helped somebody just a little bit along the way. And we volunteer to help people, but we also get something out of it ourselves. It's I don't know what the word is, but you do feel better after doing some little thing for one person.
Yeah. I think that is great. I think that's actually common to anyone working in the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre, that sense of doing something. You're not doing any harm with, hopefully, with all the training and the processes and the rest of it. And you might be doing good, and that's better than sitting railing at the darkness in some ways. It's like the old, it's not an old thing, I think, don't get mad, get even. I sometimes feel working in the centre, we're getting even, or we're helping to even things out a little bit. So with that, I want to say a huge thank you to our 4 volunteers. It's actually not easy to come out and say, this is what I'm doing, and this is my, you know, this is my motivation, and this is what I found in it. So fair dues to all four of you. You were great. Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you very much for all the work you do for the centre, you and your colleagues and your fellow volunteers. It is just an essential part of what we do as an organisation. It's an essential public service, I would say, that you do. And you do it very, very well. And we also love the sort of colour and difference that volunteers bring into the centre as well. And all of that is very, very useful. So to you and all your colleagues, from those of us who are doing it as the day job as well, many, many thanks. Thanks for the times you've picked up a slot that you didn't have to take because somebody got sick or wasn't able to do it, went on holidays, wasn't able to do it. Thanks for all the times that you did that little bit extra as well. And this evening's another one of those times where you did that little bit extra. Thank you very much as well to the staff, to Zania Ferrigul, to Yvonne Woods, who organised this webinar here this evening, to Mairead Mallon and Cleona Woods, who were mentioned, who are a huge part of the training, as is Michelle Grehan, who runs the helpline. So to all of those, many, many thanks. For anyone on the line, please, if you're halfway interested, look it up and take it a step further. You'll see where people here, okay, they did it when the time was right, but they went and they did make the effort to find out, even if it did seem a little bit daunting. And from what I heard here, they understood themselves better, as well as providing this magnificent public service. So we'll have a slide coming up at the end with the details on it. There is training, next training for volunteers is happening late September and October. The dates are there. You'll also find it on the website, drcc.ie, get involved. And if you want to ask any questions about it, contact the folks who are running the volunteer services, because they will be able to help you. And lastly, thank you very much to the ever efficient Tom, who managed the running, Tom Duke, who managed the running of this webinar. And with that, I'm going to say thank you, goodbye, and thank you all very much who've come in to be part of this webinar here this evening. Hopefully we will see some, if not all of you, again in the not too distant future. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Noeline.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.